Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 700 Club. It has become the hottest topic in politics right now. Reports that White House officials covered up President Biden's failing mental health.
Well, now a new book sheds light on what happened, and the fallout could lead to congressional investigations with serious political implications. CBN's chief political analyst David Brody has the story.
The book Original Sin by journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson has shaken official Washington with its in-depth look at efforts by White House and Democrat officials to cover up Joe Biden's obvious mental decline. The authors provide numerous examples, including a town hall staged by the 2024 campaign that went south.
Joe Biden's town hall, which was closed to press, was so bad that campaign officials determined that it was not usable for a campaign commercial.
And yet the president's top strategist and family members, known in the book as the Politburo, looked the other way and dismissed it. Chris Whipple, author of the bestseller Uncharted, documenting the 2024 campaign, has similar stories from White House sources. Whipple recounts one story of Biden preparing at Camp David before the infamous debate disaster against Donald Trump.
He wandered out at one point to the pool and sank into a lounge chair and fell sound asleep. And yet, the Biden camp kept sailing toward that iceberg. The debate.
Whipple isn't convinced this amounts to a full-fledged Watergate-style cover-up. He thinks it's more about Biden's top aides becoming more delusional and convinced that Biden was the only Democrat who could beat Trump.
The stunning thing to me is that nobody ever sat Joe Biden down and said, Mr. President, you sure about this?
Perhaps not so stunning is how much of the legacy media covered it up too. One of Original Sin's authors, Jake Tapper, has been called out during his book tour for looking the other way during the campaign and now cashing in by writing a book about it.
There was no effort, none, to get to the bottom of this. And now for you guys to write this book like there was a cover up, it's like there was a cover up and there was an attempted cover up. It could only ever work if you allowed it, if the press allowed it.
This has also led to questions about Biden's recent prostate cancer diagnosis, with skeptics wondering how something deemed so serious went undetected, especially for a president of the United States.
Why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff.
Beyond scrutiny over physical and mental health issues, Congress now wants to investigate who else may have been making executive decisions while Biden sat in the Oval Office. There are reports that Biden extensively used what is known as the auto pen to sign legislation rather than his personal signature. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer wants answers.
We're going to bring everyone that we believe was involved in any role in the use of the auto pen. We're going to invite them to come in for a transcribed interview. If they want, then they will receive a subpoena and they will have a full-blown deposition.
All right, David Brody is with us now. David, these congressional investigations, do you think they'll really lead to anything fruitful here?
I think they actually will, and it involves that auto pen issue. Look, and I think ultimately that auto pen issue is probably going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, first of all, there's not even a case right now, a legal case around at this point. But this has been controversial for many, many years about whether or not the auto pen is actually constitutional. Legal scholars disagree about this. So I think these congressional investigations could lead ultimately to someone pursuing a legal case that could end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. Look, I mean, the auto pen is controversial because in Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution, it says he, the president, shall sign the document. Does that mean a wet signature? In other words, an actual signature? Or an auto pen signature? Well, look, Barack Obama's used the auto pen. There have been other presidents that have used the auto pen. George W. Bush did not use the auto pen, saying he thought it was unconstitutional. This has never been tested in a court of law, so we now wait and see. The difference here, though, is with Joe Biden being mentally incapacitated, that raises a whole other slew of questions about who was actually taking charge of the auto pen, and it was done in batch signatures, apparently, as it relates to clemency and pardons. I think that's where this could lead.
All right, what about the impact on the media? They covered it up. And then Jake Tapper, are you surprised? Do you think he's surprised, really, that he's taken such a beating for this book, releasing this now? What's the impact on the media fallout?
I don't think he's surprised. I mean, he knew the pushback and the criticism was coming. And, you know, I think he's 56 years old, but after this book tour, he looks about 156 because it has been rough. He in essence says that the media didn't do their due diligence, and he says he's humbled by that, but doesn't believe there was a cover-up. Look, I've read the book, Andrew, and I've seen all of the examples in the book. And as you go down example by example, everything that they, quote, uncovered after the fact, it makes you wonder, why was none of this uncovered beforehand? Jake Tapper and others say, well, look, White House officials were covering up. They were lying. Well, this just in Washington, lying is like second nature. All politicians, all White Houses lie. You got to get to the truth. And that's where the cover-up comes into play, because they look the other way.
It was mentioned in your report. Do you truly think nobody sat down with President Biden and said, look, this is not a good idea, don't run again? I mean, not even his wife, nobody?
Yes. Nobody. And the reason I know that is beyond just the original Sin book. I actually talked to the author, Chris Whipple, who's in that piece, who said that to me on camera. And then he explains ad nauseum, if you will, all of the political scandal behind all of this. He says he doesn't really call it a cover-up. He says the real travesty in all this is that nobody went to Biden and said, what are you doing here? And the reason is because they felt that Biden was still their best shot to beat Trump. And so they decided just not to say anything and cover it up.
Does it really hurt the Democratic Party in 6 months, a year? Is it a story anymore? Does it really hurt them overall?
Well, absolutely, because it's a brand issue. You know, people are searching for the truth. We know the truth is in Jesus. That's the number one truth out there. But in terms of the politics of it, people are frustrated because they're not getting the truth. And you have a Democrat Party, it's calling men women and women men. And I can go down the list of lies that Democrats have told, and they're trying to spin it as truth. That's the problem. And that this narrative about more cover-up, more lies from a Biden administration plays to that anti-brand, if you will, which is what the Democrats do not need at this point.
All right, David, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, but in other news, Israel is striking back after multiple missile attacks on the Jewish state. John Jessup has that story from Washington. John.
That is right, Andrew. Israeli fighter jets destroyed the Houthi rebels' final aircraft in a strike on the Sana'a International Airport on Yemen today. The attack came after multiple missile attacks by the Houthis on Israel in recent days. Israel previously launched strikes earlier this month, but the Houthis kept up their missile launches against Israel. Today's attack comes at the same time the New York Times reports that American officials are concerned Israel could attack the Iranian nuclear program with very little warning and before the United States could pressure Israel not to proceed. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office denies that reporting. Meanwhile, chaos erupted on the second day of aid operations by a new U.S.-backed group in Gaza as desperate Palestinians overwhelmed a center distributing food on Tuesday, breaking through fences. Israel said nearby troops fired warning shots. And here in Washington, top Israeli officials met with U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff to discuss a possible hostage and ceasefire deal, along with U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. Witkoff says Israel has agreed to the ceasefire deal, but Hamas has not. Well, turning now to Turkey, where a glimmer of hope has emerged after more than 40 years of fighting. PKK militants were once focused on the armed struggle for independence for the Kurdish people. Now they want peace with the Turkish government. CBN's George Thomas reports from Turkey on a possible move toward ending the long conflict.
In Diyarbakir, a Turkish city known for its large Kurdish population, there's a growing sense of hope. After decades of violence, many here believe peace might finally be within reach.
Turkey has been tired of this war for 40 years. The people of this region are tired of war.
The Kurdish Workers' Party, or PKK, recently announced it will disband and disarm as part of a new peace initiative with Turkey. Mustafa Akyol is with the Cato Institute.
The PKK might not be a familiar organization for a lot of people in the West, but for Turkey, this is the terrorist organization that is fighting the Turkish government.
Founded more than 40 years ago, it originally fought for an independent Kurdish state. The PKK is classified as a terrorist organization by Turkey, the U.S., and the European Union. Dr. Sinan Sidi is with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
It is estimated that up until now, about 50,000 casualties on both sides have taken place. Many of them have not just been restricted to just military and state personnel, but also a lot of civilian casualties have taken place too.
Kurds make up about 20% of Turkey's 86 million people. When the Kurdish Workers' Party, or PKK, launched its insurgency against the Turkish government here back in 1984, their mission was to create this independent Kurdish state. But then in the 1990s, the focus began to shift and they started pushing for greater cultural, political, and religious rights for Kurds living within the country. So why seek peace now?
The PKK realizes that the world has changed dramatically. In other words, it's extremely difficult these days to wage a national struggle with weapons in this age.
CD suggests changing dynamics in the Middle East may have also helped shift PKK's strategy. The main factors being the fall of Assad's regime in Syria, the weakening of Iran, and Israel's ongoing campaigns against Hezbollah and Hamas.
The PKK is looking at this thing and thinking, well, I can't just continue business as usual. Things are changing. The ground is moving inside of the region.
Rashid Nasir, a Kurd living in Istanbul, tells CBN News that he's hopeful that PKK's decision to lay down arms will open the door to a more peaceful future.
We cannot bring back all those who died, so the best solution is a ceasefire so that more of our people don't end up dying. Both sides have suffered a lot.
Turkey's President Recep Erdogan recently welcomed the announcement.
Today crossed another critical threshold in the process of a terror-free Turkey. The terrorist organization announced that it decided to disband and surrender its weapons. We find that this decision is important in terms of strengthening the security of our country and the peace of our region.
There's cautious optimism here. While the details of the peace initiative have not been made public, many hope this will mark the beginning of lasting peace between the PKK and the Turkish government, as well as a better future for the Kurds in the region. George Thomas, CBN News, Istanbul.
Andrew, more and more, it looks like we're witnessing the reshaping of the Middle East.
That's right, John. You know, if you've watched this program for any length of time, you know we often encourage people, ask people, or pray on the program for regions in conflict. And here we're seeing an answer to prayer after 4 decades of terrorism and war. Here is a terrorist organization laying down arms, disbanding and disarming. We appreciate George filing that story all the way from Istanbul. Good news.